Hi, everybody. I'm Dominic Damiano,
And I'm Jeff Fowler.
and you're watching 4 Deep Sports Talk. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Dominic Damiano with Jeff Fowler. We are doing our high school 2014 wrap-up, and we're going to dive right into Division One South. And here they are. This is how they finished. With their record and their power ranking. Severian perfect at 7-0 with a 19.57 power ranking. Newton North perfect 7-0, a 16.43 power ranking. Brockton High 5-2, 16.29 power ranking. Catholic Memorial 4-3, a 14.29 power ranking. The Trojans of Bridgewater Raynham in the 5th spot, 4-3 with a 14.14 power ranking. BC High 3-4 with a 10 power ranking. The Whalers of New Bedford 4-3 record with a 19.71 power ranking. Attleboro, the Bombardiers 3-4 with a 9.14 power ranking. Here are the scores from that round. Severian beats Attleboro 14-0. BR beats Catholic Memorial 14-0. It was Newton North over New Bedford. The Whalers 24-13. And BC upsets Brockton High 10-0 at Brockton High. Moving on to the next round of that playoff. Severian matched up against Bridgewater Raynham. Oh, nice slip up there, Dom. And Severian prevails 27-0. BC High beats Newton North 28-0. And Severian wins the South Sectional 24-10 over BC High, their divisional rival in the Catholic Conference. Severian moves on to wins the South Sectional.
Pretty competitive bracket there. A couple of the games actually were closer than the scores had shown. Newton North, BC High, I thought that was an interesting matchup. Newton North, very interesting team going into this new playoff system. 2 years in a row as the number 7 seed, and they, of course, were blown out in the first year by Bridgewater Raynham, but they stuck around against a tough BC High team, a team that had defeated Brockton, as you mentioned, Dom, in the first round, and that was a rematch from a game earlier in the season, Brockton getting the upper hand. But BC High scouting the Boxers well, went down to Marciano Stadium. It was a spooky night on Halloween, and kind of scary good was BC High that night, shutting out Brockton. Boxers failing to get on the board, failing to get much going at all offensively. So interestingly, Severian, as they were moving through the bracket and talking to some of the scouts and some of the super fans over there, their biggest fear going into that game, going into the tournament, was Brockton. They figured they would face them in the sectional final. Brockton never gets there. Severian having to march through the Catholic Conference essentially twice to get to the final, and with a couple of their powerhouses. Joe Gaziano, of course, is the Massachusetts Football Player of the Year, as just named by Gatorade, and also Noah Sorrento, who going into the Super Bowl, we'll talk about the Super Bowl in a couple minutes, but on their way to that on Thanksgiving Day, 4 touchdowns against the Prep, and then in the Super Bowl itself, 4 touchdowns again. So pretty big powerhouse over there, over at Severian.
Exactly correct. That's why they're the South Sectional. They looked unstoppable. Like you said, we'll touch on the Super Bowl later in the program, how they finished. But we can move on to Division Two.
So Division Two South, again, this is the South bracket, and we'll go through the power rankings first. Kind of an interesting thing going on over there with King Philip. They've jumped on the radar here the last couple of years. Undefeated regular season, had a 21.0 power ranking. That's pretty good Massachusetts standards. Marshfield, a team that was winless just 2 seasons ago, had really stayed the course, stayed with the younger players. Lou Silver believed in his freshmen and his underclassmen, and they put together a 6-1 regular season string. Natick also right there at 6-1. Needham at 5-2. Quincy, how about the Presidents, 6-1 in the regular season. And Duxbury at 5-2. Mansfield right behind them at 4-2, and Braintree at 4-3. So you look at the first round matchups on your screen there, some key games. King Philip blowing out Braintree 34-6, and Needham and Quincy, that was an interesting battle for a first round game. Needham getting the upper hand 29-27 in overtime. How about the Rams of Marshfield blowing out the Hornets 42-14? That was no small achievement there. Mansfield always putting very good football teams on the field, especially as you get to the later part of the season. But Marshfield with the upper hand there. And then Natick over Duxbury, another big win for them, 48-22. So we go to the sectional finals now in Division II. In the south side of the bracket, King Philip with a shutout over Needham, 28-0 Marshfield. You started to get the sense that something was going on there as they got a 35-point win over Natick. And then Marshfield holding on to beat King Philip 2012 in the South Division II final. So the Rams were starting to make their presence known as we got later on in the season.
They really have, Jeff. And one thing about the Rams, they got tested. Of course, I'm referring to the Bridgewater Ram Trojans game. I mean, of course, unfortunately, Bridgewater did fumble a lot, but like a good team does, the Rams, they handled it to be that was a game played later on in the season. But again, we'll touch on the Marshfield results as they went into that Division II Super Bowl later in the show. Moving on to Division III. And the brackets were like this. Here how they were ranked. The Rebels of Walpole, 7-0 with a 20-point power ranking, just about perfect. Stoughton, 7-0 out of the Hockomock, a 19.86 power ranking. North Attleboro, 5-2, a 15.43 power ranking. Milford, 4-3, a 12.71 power ranking. Hopkinton in the 5th spot, 3-4, 11.71 power ranking. Medfield, 5-2 with 11.14 power ranking. All the Rams. The Tigers, also out of the Hockomock, I believe it's a Hockomock Small, 3-4 at 10.29 power ranking. The Shamrocks of Bishop Fien out of the EAC, they finished 3-4, 9.43 power ranking. And here are your results. Walpole really taking it to the Fien, 28-7. Then it was Milford over Hopkinton, 48-34. Stoughton, they play in the regular season, so this is almost like a rematch from this season. 23-16, the Black Knights over Oliver Ames. It was Medfield over North Attleboro, the Red Rockets, 19-10. Moving on to the finals of the South Sectional Division 3, Southwest Division 3. And they played out like this. The Rebels moved on with a convincing win over Medfield, 41-14. Medfield upsets the Black Knights of Stoughton, 23-13. And in your final, it was the Rebels over Medfield, 28-14. One thing about the Walpole Rebels is that they've always been known for more of a baseball type of school, and they're really coming into their own in football. And again, they prove it again by winning the South Section Division 3 Southwest.
Had a big team there back in the late 80s too.
Yep.
Had a pretty good run for football and defeated Brockton, as a matter of fact, and back in the glory days of the Boxers over at the old Foxborough Stadium. So now look at the other half of Division 3 South is the Southeast field. Pretty loaded bracket, actually, as we go through the power rankings here. Somerset Berkeley 7-0, finishing the season undefeated. Dartmouth at 5-2. Dighton Rehoboth also at 5-2. Plymouth South at 4-3. Plymouth North at 3-4. Sandwich at 3-4. Nauset at 2-5, and Whitman Hanson at 3-4 there. And if you're wondering the difference, why is a 2-5 team ahead? Power rankings take several things into consideration: strength of schedule, also how your opponents do during the season, whether or not they win or lose. So there's a little bit of a system there that's actually proven to be pretty successful so far in the 2 years. So the first round went down like this. Somerset Berkeley, again, riding high, 7-0 record, and they really took it to Whitman Hanson, a team. The Panthers been struggling a couple bit the last couple of years since Bob Bancroft moved on there. 51-15 loss there in the first round. Plymouth South winning the cross rival 21-14 over the North. Dartmouth shutting out Nauset 21-0, and Dighton Rehoboth with a shutout win over Sandwich. So as they got to the semi-final round, Somerset Berkeley with a pretty impressive win over Plymouth South, 26-2, considering that Plymouth South just a year ago had won that section. Somerset Berkeley pretty much making them a non-factor. Dartmouth was starting to roll. They got the win over Dighton Rehoboth 33-12. And in what was a very competitive game, Dartmouth over Somerset Berkeley 14-0. And so Dartmouth takes the Division III Southeast bracket. We'll have some more on the Indians coming up in just a little bit.
What we'll do right now, we'll step away. You're watching 4 Deep Sports Talk. Jeff and I will be right back as we do our roundup, the 2014 high school playoff bracket. We'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back. Jeff Fowler, Dominic Damiano here as we do our 4 Deep Sports Talk 2014 football wrap-up. We've been through actually 4 divisions, if you count Southeast and Southwest Division 3. We'll jump into Division 4, and later in the show, I've asked Jeff to give us his idea or maybe a better playoff bracket. He put a couple notes together. We'll look at that, and of course, I'll colorfully rebut that and add the color to that, and we'll again touch on the new playoff bracket that we believe as high school football fans might actually benefit the MIAA.
The 4 Deep Sports Bowl.
The 4 Deep Sports, there you go. All right, so
That's what we're advocating for here.
there you go. So diving into Division 4 South, it was like this. Of course, everyone knows 8 teams qualified, and they were laid out like this. Holliston was perfect at 7-0 with a 21.71 power ranking. Apponequet 7-0 with an 18.29 power ranking. Middleborough, the Sachems, again 7-0, coming out of that Patriot League, 17.71 power ranking. Foxborough, the Warriors, 5-2, 16.43 power ranking. Westwood, the Mustangs, 4-3, a 14.43 power ranking. The Indians, also out of the Patriot League, 5-2, 14.43 power ranking. Dennis Sharmuth, out of the Bay State, 5-2 with a 13.71 power ranking. And Scituate, 3-4 with 11.86, and here are the results from the quarterfinals. Holliston, if we can go back to that bracket. Thank you. Holliston over Scituate, 20 in a very close game, 28-22. Actually, it was a double wing against the double wing offense in that game. Foxborough sneaks by Westwood, 14-13. Apponequet loses in an upset over Dennis Sharmuth. And I'll touch a comment about that SCC in a minute. Again, it's Dennis Sharmuth beats Apponequet 30-27. Middleborough takes care of in a rematch from the last game of the season, which basically decided the Patriot League. Again, Middleborough over the Indians of Hanover 22-13. Moving on to the semis, Holliston beats Foxborough 35-14 in a very low-scoring game. Of course, I'm putting a little color in there. It was Middleborough over Dennis Sharmuth 49-42, and I had the pleasure of doing that game on 88.5 FM. That was a great game to call. And then, of course, I had to go to the cold weather out there in Holliston. And these guys are for real. We're going to touch on their Super Bowl run at the end of the show. Holliston, in the same score, beats up Middleborough. I hate to say it like that, but they did 35-13. And Athy and Elkinson, their wingback, is the real deal in Holliston. And again, we'll touch on their Super Bowl run out of Division 4. Moving on to Division 5.
So again, another loaded bracket in the field as we look at the power rankings in the Division 5 South field. East Bridgewater 6-1, Abington also 6-1. Those 2 teams would have a lot to say about this bracket by the time we got to the end. Rockland right behind them at 5-2. So those are always the 3 power teams, and they were in it once again. A team, however, that's been sneaking up the ladder here, Greater New Bedford at 5-2 in the regular season. Ashland at 4-3. Cardinal Spellman kind of had an up-and-down season, 3-3 in the regular season, had a strong finish. Dover Sherborne at 4-3, and Fairhaven at 4-3 at the end of it. So first round scores here: East Bridgewater taking care of Fairhaven 49-12. Greater New Bedford over Ashland in a defensive struggle there, 7-3. Abington beat Dover Sherborne 34-8. It was Spellman over Rockland 32-22. One note about the Greater New Bedford Ashland game, if I remember correctly, that was also played in a nor'easter, so that could have made the difference there with the score. So as we get to the semifinals of this bracket, East Bridgewater easily taking care of Greater New Bedford at 42-10. Abington squeaks by Spellman in what is also always a close game, 14-8. Now we've talked about how this tournament has benefited a lot of teams. Here's the other side of it. East Bridgewater, the Vikings in the regular season, finally beat Abington.
Right.
It's been their Achilles heel for years. It was the equivalent of Red Sox and Yankees.
Right.
East Bridgewater finally gets it done, but it doesn't matter because they lose to them in the sectional final 38-20. So East Bridgewater pretty much would have had a ticket to Gillette. Abington takes that out of their hands, and the Green Wave march on in the Division 5 South bracket.
I like the way the format. Of course, we're going to touch on your outlook, your opinion, of course, as far as how it should be. Well, you and I talked about this for, oh my goodness, for 365 days and how we believe it should be better. And you've got some excellent notes. We'll touch on that. But I like the idea that another team does have another chance to, get back at someone who beat them in the regular season. And I like the idea of 8 teams in this tournament, but there are a lot of other things that you mentioned were great points. We'll step away. You are watching 4 Deep Sports Talk. Jeff Fowler, Dominic Damiano will be back with more.
4 Deep Sports Talk. Let us help you get your business back into the game. We cover youth sporting events from Little League Baseball to youth football and hockey, and even AAU basketball. We even do high school events and college recruiting DVDs. Every Friday at 4:05 and Saturday at 11:05, exclusively on 1530 AM WBBF. 4 Deep Sports Talk, where high school and youth athletes come first.
Everybody, welcome back. Dominic Damiano, Jeff Fowler joining me today. Welcoming him to the 4 Deep Sports Talk crew. He's been on the crew for a while, but now he's officially in the picture. Now we just got to get him on the radio. And it's
nice for an old has-been to be in front of the camera once in a while.
I apologize. We've run down through 5 divisions. Of course, Division 3 East, Division 3 West. Now we're going to touch on Division 6. And this is how they were laid out. I apologize. I don't have the official brackets in front of me, but here are some of the scores, and then we'll go into the Super Bowl results right after this. Pope John Paul II beats West Bridgewater, the Wildcats, 40-20. It was Millis Hopedale having their way with Mashpee. I hate to say it like that, but the score speaks for itself, 42-26. In overtime, in this Mayflower Lodge matchup, Bishop Conley, the Cougars, upset the Hawks of Southeastern in overtime. They come from behind 25-22. Cohasset has no problem with Nantucket, the Whalers, 35-3. Moving on to the semifinals. It was Millis Hopedale upsetting, I believe this is the number 1 seed, Pope John Paul II, 30-12. They move on to the sectional finals. It was Cohasset, no problem with the Cougars of Bishop Conley, 28-7. Then in your finals, Cohasset beats Millis Hopedale, 20-12. They move on to the Division 6 Super Bowl. And with that being said, we could jump right into the Super Bowl bracket.
Yeah, it was another Super Saturday at Gillette Stadium, and a great turnout of teams here and some great games. And it began early in the morning, 9 a.m. with the Division 6 Super Bowl. And this actually was a rematch of last year's game. We've had this playoff system now for 2 years, and Cohasset and Littleton began the inaugural Division 6 Super Bowl last year, and it was Littleton getting that one 52-35. So the Skippers were looking for a little revenge this year, and they got it with a 35-22 win, Cohasset over Littleton.
Also, we'll go to Division 2, the Rams. I almost said Middleborough, Marshfield, the Rams really take care of Longmeadow, 45-6. We're talking about one-handed catches in the middle of the field, one-handed interceptions by that excellent by that secondary of Marshfield. And they move on convincingly, winning the Division 2 Super Bowl, again, 45-6.
Rams, one of the Super Bowl winners that were on the Bridgewater-Rainham schedule earlier this year. Marshfield came in with an 11-game winning streak. Their only loss came to BCI on the home opener, and that was in the final seconds of that game. Yep. And keep in mind, again, Lou Silva's team was winless just 2 years ago.
Right.
And here they are at Gillette Stadium, had a 39-0 lead at the half, so it was a pretty dominating win for Marshfield. That was a good game, but however, the game of the day, without a doubt, was the one that was hyped for several months. Everybody knew this was going to be the matchup all along. They Division I playoffs, they really didn't even have to have the tournament because we all knew at the end it would be Everett and Xaverian. And a lot of history behind this game. This is Xaverian's 11th Super Bowl title since 1997. They finished the season ranked number 1, 12-0. These two teams now have met 4 times in total, and Xaverian has won every one of them, 96, 98, and again in 2009, and once again in 2014, Xaverian beating Everett 38-29. You got the sense when you watched this game, Don, on TV,
Yep.
that this was really, these were men amongst boys. I mean,
Right.
this was a whole other level of football that we were
Oh,
watching.
right. Just the ability alone, the way these kids were moving, the speed of the game. We've always talked about how the speed of the game is different in all different sports. But when you get to that Division I play, it's like you said, men amongst boys.
And I would
know?
venture to guess probably a quarter of the fans in attendance were college scouts. You know,
yeah.
we already have, Joe Gaziano, who's committed to Northwestern University, Massachusetts Gatorade Player of the Year.
Yep.
He's now finalist for the National Player of the Year awards. We've got guys like Mark Sanchez, Wes Welker, Anquan Bolden, just to name a few that have also gotten this award. So it's a pretty big deal. The last player from Xaverian to win the award, of course, was Hasselbeck,
Right.
who had a pretty good run in the NFL as quarterback. But everybody's on Gaziano. I got to tell you, the guy that's impressed me the most in this season has been Noah Sorrento. And,
Oh, yeah, good point.
He just, completely shut out Bridgewater Rainham in their matchup. But again, 4 touchdowns on Thanksgiving Day in a game where teams across the state were debating: do we sit our starters? Do we play our starters?
Right.
Xaverian and St. John's Prep, that rivalry probably bigger than the Super Bowl
Right.
in itself. And Charlie Stevenson had no reservations at all. He was playing his starters. And in that game, Sorrento on the big stage comes through. And oh, by the way, he follows it up at Gillette Stadium with another 4 touchdown performance. 8 touchdowns between Thanksgiving and the Super Bowl for Xaverian to finish their season undefeated, unbeaten, and ranked number 1. Pretty impressive stuff.
It really is. Moving on to the next bracket here on Super Bowl Saturday. Holliston beats Waconia, a 140-mile trip, and the Panthers take care of them convincingly 43-0. And I talked about Arthur. He actually, the quarterback, and they run that double wing. I mean, with perfection. The U.S. Navy Academy would be so proud the way they run that offense. Of course, that's the bread and butter of the U.S. Army offense that they run over there at the academy. Again, Holliston 43-0 over Waconia, convincingly 43-0.
So we just talked about Sorrento's 4 touchdowns, and they were pretty good. But Zach Elkinson for Holliston, you mentioned him earlier in the season. 5 touchdowns. He had 5 out of the 6 touchdowns that Holliston scored in the game. It was the Zach Elkinson show, as a matter of fact. 5 touchdowns, 212 yards on just 9 carries. Touched the ball 9 times.
That again, that offense, that double wing offense, is so hard. It's so deceiving to pick up the runner so late on those options, and they call one of the formations they call a super power. 99, 80, depending on what side of the ball, odd or even, and they do that so good over there in Holliston.
Yeah, you either have an answer for that defense or you don't.
Exactly.
Which kind of makes us wonder why Army hasn't been much better. But that's another conversation for another day.
Absolutely.
So as we look at the Division III Super Bowl, again, this was an interesting matchup, Melrose and Dartmouth, and to kind of talk about the way they got to this game, especially the Dartmouth Indians, again, a team that plays in the Old Colony League, reseeded to Division III for the tournament itself. Pretty competitive run. And interestingly, in the Eastern Final at Marciano Stadium, Dartmouth trailing in the game, about 6 minutes plus left in the game. Walpole seems to be on their way to the Super Bowl. Their sideline pretty excited about it. Dartmouth turns around and runs off 3 scores in a matter of about 2.5 minutes. So the Dartmouth Indians stun Walpole. Then they get to Gillette Stadium. Dartmouth jumps on the board, first 14 points of the game, and then they don't score again. They start to sputter. Their defense goes into protection mode. They hold on to beat Melrose 14-7. So again, talking about defense winning championships. Interesting to note, under the old system, Dartmouth would not have even made the playoffs. So,
and we will touch on that later.
We will, but a pretty good Cinderella run. And impressive. It's important to play well down the stretch, and Dartmouth certainly did that.
Right. Moving on to Division 5, the Green Wave, like Jeff talked about earlier, they got their retribution, I believe I'm using the right word, over East Bridgewater, the Vikings. And they followed that all the way again into Division 5 Super Bowl. They take care of Northbridge 36-6. And the Green Wave, the Green Wave of Abington, again, one of those teams of like, and I can use Brockton, I can use BR as an example. Now Marshfield, Mansfield's going through the transition of younger players going into their system, so they're regrouping. But Abington is one of those teams, again, just like some of those other schools I just mentioned, that always have been consistent in football to make the playoffs and move on to win the Super Bowl. And they prove it again this year in 2014 with a convincing 36-6 win again over Northbridge. Now, with that being said, I've asked Jeff, again, behind the scenes, to give me his ideas on a better playoff system.
I applaud the committee for coming together, for realizing that, you know, people have talked for years that we need some kind of a system.
Right.
So they've gotten the ball rolling. They developed a 2-year system, basically a pilot program. And, you know, it's had definitely some advantages. We talked earlier about some of the quirks to it. So here's kind of in a perfect world. You mentioned earlier enrollment. I think I agree with that 100%. If School A has X number of students and School B has X number of students, then in theory, they should both have the same opportunity to put a competitive team on the field.
Yep.
If that program, you know, if the population in the community is not into football, or if the program just isn't successful, then so be it. That's really nothing that the state can do about it. It is what it is. But here's one scenario that I think could work. Again, they'll be looking at potential adjustments as we go through the offseason. So my first thought is eliminate the leagues. I really don't see any point in having them at this point. You know, you really, yes, you get an automatic bid if you win, but you know, the leagues are scattered throughout now. There's a lot of difficulty in maintaining them in any event. I like the idea of playing a round-robin schedule. 7-game schedule seems fine for me for the regular season. I think you get a pretty good sense of where your team is.
Yep.
Within the divisions, you have more than 8 teams, so this gives you an opportunity to rotate schedules each year.
Yep.
You put 7 teams on your schedule, and then you rotate the other 3 or 4 that might be in there the following year. It also gives you an opportunity to opt out for your Thanksgiving opponent. So one of the biggest issues we've had here in these 2 years is that teams may have to play each other several times. It happened again. There's Brockton, New Bedford playing each other twice.
Right.
You know, Abington, East Bridgewater.
Right.
And again, these are natural rivalries, and you want to protect the Thanksgiving rivalries because the Super Bowls are nice, the championships are great, Gillette Stadium, it's a fun experience for the students. They don't make any money with these games. They lose money with these games. They lose money with the playoffs altogether. Thanksgiving is the cash cow. That's the day you want to make money, so that's the game you want to maintain. For the playoffs itself, if you want to keep them, I'd say keep your top 8 teams, North and South, in Eastern Massachusetts. Notice I'm not mentioning Central or Western Massachusetts here, and I'll explain that one in a minute. Super Bowls for themselves, have them the weekend before Thanksgiving. If anybody was at Marciano Stadium this year on the Saturday before Thanksgiving, that was probably the largest attended playoff games that they had.
Right.
3 games. It was kind of a little mini Super Bowl day, if you will. I think that weekend makes the most sense. I think it's an off weekend for the most part in college football. You're not competing with the larger games. You know, you're not losing the significance of Thanksgiving because you keep Thanksgiving. You play Thanksgiving after the Super Bowls.
Right.
It's your final chance for your seniors to get out there. You make it Senior Day. One thing I noticed this year covering several of the regular season games is you bounce around to the different schools, and they really didn't know when to have their Senior Day because they didn't know when their final game was going to be.
Yeah, good point.
So in the case of Marshfield, they held their senior game in early October.
Right, week 6,
yeah,
something like that.
Fans aren't used to that.
Right.
The school's not used to it. It doesn't make sense. You know, the pep rally is still 6 weeks later. It just, so again, I hate to say it's about money, but if you're going to continue to play these sports, it is about money to an extent.
Sure.
Parents need to know when the games are. They need to be better scheduled. There's no reason why you can't post a schedule in August. These are when the games are. These are when your playoff games will be. Of course, weather factors in that you could have postponements. We understand that, but there needs to be a pretty good sense. I thought they did a much better job with the Super Bowl schedule this year. That was out before Thanksgiving, so you knew when the games were going to be. You know, parents have a lot of things going on. Fans have a lot of things going on. There's a lot of competition out there for your interest. And, you know, if you want to get people out of the gate, you got to make it interesting for them.
Oh, boy, you can check us out on all one word, 4deepsportstalk.com. You can check out Jeff's blog, which is going to cover, actually covering what he just mentioned about the high school football bracket. That'll be up by the end of the week. Again, you can check us on Facebook.
I don't have a computer, dog.
Oh, you don't?
No. No, I just wrote it down in pen.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's
also on Facebook, 4 Deep Sports Talk, Youth Sports Leader. For Jeff Fowler, I'm Dominic Damiano. I want to thank Jason Pritchard in the background making this all happen. back here in our Bridgewater studios. We will catch you next time as we cover soccer. We'll catch you. Everyone have a great holiday.